Should start that now. So
we supposedly have 27 tonight, so we're almost there. Can you guys can all hear me all right, right? Cool.
yes.
You guys are so quiet. All right. I'm sure that there'll be people that will be wandering in. We'll give people a couple more minutes. We'll give people about 2 more minutes or so to wander in. Yeah. Won't give too much away. Has everybody been participating in some of the other breakout sessions? And I mean, that's a whole nother day of programming tomorrow, right, Mel? It's not the same without the Dutch oven cook-off, though.
Over Zoom. Did you attend that?
It's just not the same without. It's just not the same without Dutch oven pizza and brownies. We'll get there. We're close. We're so close. Morgan Hill had 2 whole cases in the last 7 days. That's it. Numbers are down to, in Santa Clara County, we're down to like 1.1 per 100,000 or something like that.
Yeah, our turkey shoot was supposedly the first open event for the council.
Well, we did do the the sporting clays events and some other things, but last year, as when we were in that kind of like in that valley between events, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot of fun to do. But yeah, I definitely hope units are starting to get back together. I know that our unit's getting back together the first week of June and for in-person meetings. The girl troop has been meeting because they're much smaller. They've been meeting for a while now in person outside. So, right, I said it's 8:05, so it's 8:05. So I'm going to go ahead and share my slide deck for you guys. Let's see. All right. So you guys should all be able to see that by now. So why are we here? We're here to talk about introducing amateur radio to your scouting program. It's something that's kind of, it's a bit near and dear to me for someone who's been in the program for a while. Also known as how I funded my hobby and justified it to my wife. By leveraging my application of amateur radio in scouting that has afforded me certain budgetary allotments. I wouldn't always have. So my name is Ray Jeck. I am also known as N6DZK. I am an amateur extra. I got my extra last year in February, right before all the lockdown. I had my license before that, and got my first license in 2012 as a technician, and then in the fall of 2013 was took my test to got my general, and then last spring took my amateur extra, which I've enjoyed a lot. I've been in scouting for 15 plus years as an adult. I was a scout as a youth in upstate New York. I am currently the Quicksilver District Commissioner, which I'm learning and new in the role. I'm with Troop 799 and Troops 2799 down here in Morgan Hill. And other stuff, I'm a PICO pioneer for anybody that's from PICO. It's kind of an honorary title that's bestowed on people that have spent a lot of time assisting with camp down there, much like some of the programs they have in High Sierra. I've been on the shooting sports committee. I do console radio support, IT support. I'm also a VE, which is a volunteer examiner for amateur radio. So I help other people that would like to join amateur radio. I help with the testing programs. As a matter of fact, there's one being conducted right now on one of my other screens over here with the San Benito group down in Hollister. They do online testing now, which is in the event of COVID, they've come up with these really great ways to offer amateur radio testing sessions online. So there's no, in some areas it's difficult to find somebody that will give you the exam. Now you can just study and go online and do that. And I'm also an an assistant emergency coordinator for the city of Morgan Hill. I help them with their amateur radio and community communications and for emergency planning, which is kind of cool. Actually, it's a lot of fun when we do our drills and stuff, because I'm a geek like that. And if you've ever used the handy talkies at any of our council events, if you've ever been to one of the events where they bring out that suitcase full of handy talkies, I built that for the council. So as a kind of a side project. So why are we here? We're here to explore the interest in adopting amateur radio and the many facets it has to offer in your unit program. And we'll talk about some of those facets because there are a lot of them. And since you're all here, mission accomplished, right? You're interested. So thank you. Good night. You can have the rest of the night off. So what is a ham? The ham, it was originally designed as the term was called, and I love the way that the term ham was first a pejorative term used by professional wired telegraphy to describe people that were ham-fisted telegraph operators. They were sloppy, or they were undisciplined in their approach to sending telegraph messages, and so they called them hams. And it was originally designed to make fun of people that were amateurish or unskilled. And the term has kind of evolved over the years, and now we kind of have adopted that and have kind of taken that and made it our own. And ham is actually a good thing. Being an amateur in this role, it has lots of benefits. There's lots of really cool things that go on with in ham radio. But in simple terms, being an amateur is what grants us access to chunks of radio spectrum for our own use to play with, and also for experimentation. There's a lot of really cool and exciting things that go on, like talking to space stations and working satellites and doing other things that take place within the amateur space where we get to learn and explore. And then one of the reasons why we do have licensing for this is it's important to introduce people that are new to the hobby to safety considerations. High power RF signals can cause damage. You can do things that can go sideways on you. And so it's important to, as you come into the hobby, to be aware of what some of those limitations are. If you're building your own radios, or if you're tinkering with systems, you can be exposed to high voltages and currents. And so that's why we want everybody to be safe. Additionally, testing introduces you to the etiquette of the systems that are in place. So ham radio is full of etiquette and procedure because it is a limited resource. The amount of spectrum that we are allotted is not large, and it is a shared resource. And so everybody in the sandbox has to play nice. Otherwise, it can cause interference and minimizes the utility of the hobby for everyone. So it's important. That's another reason why we do testing. A lot of people think of ham as this. So a lot of people in them, they get kind of set in their mind that, ham means these, big ginormous radios with lots of dials and buttons and things that are too complicated to learn or too expensive. And so, you have your cockpit system over there, and but it can also look like this, right? We've all remember when we were little kids and we talked with those silly little toy walkie-talkies to our friends across the street, or in this case, you got these 3 scouts here on either side, either on a camp out or learning to use the systems, learning to be communicators, which is something that I emphasize in our program, in our unit, is that yes, the radios and all that stuff are cool, but being a good communicator is one of the primary goals here. So how does ham radio enhance our program? Amateur radio is a multidiscipline hobby, a lot like robotics in a lot of ways. It is that directly supports and benefits from many of the ideals and goals of scouting. Within the hobby, there are so many facets that tie directly into scouting ideals: citizenship, preparedness, exploration. But it's also something tangible that can directly support unit activities by increasing safety communications, providing challenges, providing purpose to events. And like the goals of most scouting achievements, amateur radio is not age restricted, right? Children as young as 10, 12 years old have passed the test to get their license. And so it's not completely unheard of. I know lots of 13-year-olds that have successfully gotten their license. So it's and it's also just like everything else. Now that we have girls in the program, it's gender neutral, right? We don't care. So as a matter of fact, several of the girls in our girl unit already have their license. So. But yeah, we have FRS radios. Why do we need this ham stuff, right? We got those little bubble pack things. They're like $15 at Walmart or whatever. And we've used those, and some of us have used those in our programs. And they have a lot of limitations. They have limited range, usually from one end of the driveway to the other sometimes, depending on them. They have highly restricted power capabilities. There's no options really for experimentation with those kinds of radios, but they're cheap and there's no license required. So a lot of people rely on them. But once you get into ham radio, you find that amateur radio is vastly superior, vastly extended ranges. You can have external types of antennas. You can literally take antennas, even with a walkie-talkie, you can take an external antenna, throw it way up in a tree with some portage and pull an antenna high in a tree and be able to extend your range and how far you can go. You have higher power options. You can utilize things like repeaters to get up and over the tops of mountains and up and over valleys with one little handy talkie, similar to the one pictured there on the slide. You can literally talk across the entire Bay Area on one handy talkie. And in some instances where the systems that they are connected to are also connected to the internet to other systems now. It's a real popular thing for repeater sites to do. You can literally talk around the world with just a simple handy talkie like this. They're still relatively inexpensive. The radio that you see there in the slide, they sell on Amazon all day, every day for like 40, 45 bucks, right? Really inexpensive. And then just the fact that the scouts are, they're studying for an exam and they pass that, it's a sense of accomplishment, and also the things that they will learn along the way. And it's also an extensible learning platform. There are so many facets to ham radio and amateur radio, and talk to the world, right? Once you get into doing things like what they call HF capabilities, where you actually are bouncing your signals off of the atmosphere down to other parts of the world. And it's a lot of fun. So amateur radio has really taken off since about 2008, which is I think it was 2007, they removed the Morse code. As of 2007, Morse code was no longer a requirement to get your license. And after that, it really took off. So once you had what they call no code testing, things have really taken a total leap. And then you also have the addition of what they call software defined radios, or radio on a chip now, which you can literally take a little board, plug it into like a laptop or a computer, and you can listen and look at the spectrum and things around the world. So all the electronic hobbyists, all the people that are all into, Raspberry Pis and Arduinos and all these other microprocessor type systems can leverage these SDR, or radios on a chip, to build all kinds of really unique and neat projects. So, wow, tell me more. Does anybody have any questions on anything we've talked about yet? We're good? Just throw up a hand, and throw up a hand if you have something, or throw it in the chat. And Mel will jump in there and poke me and let me know that there's a question waiting for me. But, feel free to ask questions as we go. Absolutely. All right. Grab the water here. So, I've been doing this for a while now. I oftentimes, you can see there's my camping setup right there. I often go camping with the troop. And when I do, I almost always take my radio gear with me, and the scouts and I talk to whoever we can talk to. It's always a fun thing to do, especially in the evenings after dinner when things are typically a little quiet. You can see that center picture there. That was that was back when I was in full beard mode, about 18 months ago. We actually launched a weather balloon. We actually launched a balloon, and we tracked it all the way across most of California before it popped on me. Unfortunately, it was my first balloon, and there's definitely some nuances to making sure that you fill those exactly to the right amount. But what I'm holding in my hand is actually a tiny little radio transmitter that's attached to the balloon, and we released that over, that was at San Luis Forbay, and we tracked it for about 1,000 miles, and it reached 29,000 feet in altitude before the envelope failed on me. It was a little windy that day, and I goosed just a hair too much helium into it, and they do get really touchy. There's a whole formula that you use for gauging, because once they get up, of course, and the atmosphere gets thinner, they expand, and mine popped. But yeah, it was pretty cool, and we had live telemetry coming in, and so we had a laptop there, and we could actually watch in real time as it traveled across the California heading down towards Southern Cal. You can see the box that I have there. It's a system I built. That's what I call my Go box. There's the large antenna tower that we've used there. That is not a normal thing. That is an abnormal. That is not something most amateur radio people have. There's a whole thing behind that, but you may have seen it before if you've been to Scoutorama in the last couple of years. We've set the tower up at Scoutorama. We've taken it to San Luis Forbay, and we've done what's called Jamboree on the air there, right there in the campsite. We've done the radio merit. The top left is we actually did at our chartering organizations, or where our troop meets at the church here in town. We actually set the tower up right there, and we did the radio merit badge as part of an overnight camp out, and set our tower there. Down in the lower right there, you can see my trailer crew, my volunteers that were there for a Scoutorama. And top middle is my truck that was all set up for doing amateur radio backcountry support for Sea Otter Classic, which is an annual, it's one of the largest cycling, it's actually, I think it is the largest cycling event in the United States. It's throughout the chunks of Monterey County, and there's literally, like, for 20 miles, there's no cell phone coverage in the backcountry there. And so we, as amateur radio operators, we actually provide radio support, and we shuffle the medics around with us so that we can stay in contact and provide coverage for the race to make sure that riders are properly supported. And then, you got some scouts there in top right that are, probably looks like they're on parking lot patrol, right? Which is a real common thing. If you've ever been to Camporee, a lot of our OA guys are all amateur radio operators as well. And so they bring their radios, and that's how we handle like receiving all the troops in and stuff when they come in for Camporee. So STEM, you knew this was coming, right? Amateur radio is like totally a plug-in for STEM. Between the science, you have atmospheric sciences like the weather balloons, space weather, RF propagation, which is dependent on the sun and sunspot activity. One of the things that people that are really into like doing long distance amateur radio, like they look at the sun weather report every day. I mean, there's literally weather report sites that you can go to that will tell you whether the atmosphere is ready to go to bounce signals off the inside of it. And that's how we do the long distance communications. And physics, we're talking about RF energy and how it propagates around our planet. Technology, software defined radios, circuit design. There's a lot of new things, digital modes, which we do. Instead of talking with voice, you're literally sending digital packets around the world now, which are very popular. Engineering, you have antenna design, and then systems design and layout, like you're just building a Go box, designing how the equipment's going to go into a cabinet, what are the wiring paths going to be, deciding wire sizes, fuse sizes, things like that. And then math, there's so much math, calculating wavelengths, calculating power consumption. The box that I use, for instance, is all solar and battery. When I take it out camping, there's no AC current. where I put at the campsite. So everything that I have runs on a battery pack and solar panels. Any questions? Community service, event support. So we use, and you don't have to, these are kind of interesting things because some of these are situations where you may not use ham radio, but the skills that you learn in ham radio are what come into play. So, you know, you heard me talk about it towards the beginning about being a good communicator. One of the things that ham radio helps you become is a good communicator. And so while at like what I've been doing the 4th of July parade here in Morgan Hill for, gosh, I think almost 7 or 8 years, we don't use ham radios. They used to a long time ago, but we actually use commercial radios. But I know how to use a radio. So when somebody sticks a radio in my hand, I know what to do with it. And I know how to communicate with it properly with the other people that are there. And that's one of the advantages of being somebody that's that uses ham radio regularly. Coyote Creek Classic is a ham radio supported event. All of the people that go around in the vehicles and do the sag wagons and the bike trails. We had people well, it wasn't last year, but the year before, literally rode like 70 miles on that bike trail, but there are ham radio operators on bikes that we had going back and forth on the trail in order to support the riders. Watsonville Air Show, the San Benito group does, there's Watsonville Air Show, Hollister Air Show. Big Sur Marathon is another really big amateur radio supported event because there's so much of that area down there that has no cell phone coverage. Police Night Out, and there's other community activities that we use ham radio for. Indirectly, again, because of communication skills that you learn in ham radio, Scoutorama, scout camps where they use the radios, the County Sporting Clays events, and any event where staff needs to be able to effectively communicate to support the event and for guest safety. For anybody that knows about the Gilroy Garlic Festival, that is an event where the local amateur radio club down here actually is who coordinates all the communications for that. And on any given day at that event, we had upwards of 350 handy talkies that we managed and worked support for. It was a really, really large communications event for something like that. And it's amateur radio operators that are helping to manage that. They do the support and manage the communications for that. And safety. Many communities have some form of volunteer community communications coordinators, which is, having locally trained communicators is an invaluable asset in any community in a time of crisis. Morgan Hill, where I live, we've had 3 major fiber cuts here and 2 lesser ones in the past 12 years, where we have literally been totally cut off. Our phone systems, cell phone systems, and internet have all been completely wiped out. And all of us that are amateur radio operators never skipped a beat. We totally, let's get on the radio, talk to anybody else that's out there. What's going on over there? Are you guys okay, right? Does anybody have any news? And then we can also get fed news in from outside of our area because our radio systems can talk for great distances. CERT. CERT is kind of a side part of amateur radio in that we, for anybody that's done CERT or Citizens Emergency Response Teams in their community, we highly encourage those members to become amateur radio operators. And then ARES RACES, which is the Amateur Radio Emergency Services and Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Services, which is a coordinated team in Santa Clara County that does regularly practice and drill that is totally supported by volunteer amateur radio operators throughout the region that have processes in place that drill regularly in the event that there's something goes sideways, right? There's so many things that we can bring to the table there.
I
Hey,
have a
Ray.
question about certs. So the cert teams right now, do they have the radio, and is it a requirement for them to know how to use this radio system, or do most of the cert teams have access to 2-3 radio systems themselves, or no? So
that's dependent on on which cert community that you're in. Like Morgan Hill has a cert, Gilroy has a cert. I don't, whatever community, they will come up with their own requirements for that. There's no There is no written requirement within CERT that you have to be a ham radio person or that you get a radio. That's up to the individual CERT teams themselves to come up with those conditions or requirements. And here in Morgan Hill, we highly encourage CERT team members to be licensed, and we offer we directly offer them the ability to take the test. Like that's part of our wrap up, is that here's how to go get your test and how to go take your test. And the reason why testing is so important is that there is a little loophole. I'm going to call loophole, but there's a provision within the FCC that if it's an emergency, you can communicate with anything that you want to. So if it's a life or death emergency situation, you can pick up an amateur radio. It doesn't matter if you have a license. You can pick up a police radio. It doesn't matter if you have a license. You can pick up any radio there or whatever equipment that you have if it's a life or death emergency in order to make a communication. But drills and practice are not life and death situations. So if you, in order to practice, in order to drill, in order to learn the etiquette, in order to learn the cadence, you need to be licensed so that you can participate in those events. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Emergency preparedness. There's all kinds of people out there that have all kinds of systems. One of the things that I can do, for instance, is in a clutch situation, I have the equipment here, literally right here on my desk, where I can actually talk to the Santa Clara County over packet radio, and I can send them disaster forms from the city. So I can get on the radio with the other members of the community and rally to find out what's going on. And if they needed to, I could send, like literally transmit request forms. We need 20 pallets of bottled water. We need, 5 pallets of blankets. We need 4 medical teams. That all goes into a form. It gets transmitted to the county, and then they work on getting us allocated those types of resources, right? And again, that's a practice type thing. And then communications. Amateur radio works even when nothing else does. Plain old RF works regardless, unless there's like a complete RF blackout because there's we've had some kind of crazy sunspot hit us or something. Typically amateur radio works. It just works, even when nothing else does. That you can see there's a couple of setups there. This is basically a one-day drill that we did. I was literally down in a park in Gilroy, literally just operating out of the back of my truck. I can just pop open the truck, plug in the battery, I pop into a little antenna up there on a tripod. I'm on the air, I'm good to go. I can literally talk throughout the entire Bay Area doing that practically. It's that's that's a little more advanced, but not like horribly so. Okay, but the emphasis is on becoming a good coordinator, right? Being a good communicator, and that's one of the things that I emphasize with our scouts. Yeah, all the cool gizmos and gadgets and all that is great if you, as you go learn more about the hobby and you adapt facets of the hobby that you want to, but learning to be a good communicator is super key, especially at that stage. So it's also a practical hobby that can heavily carry over into your professional careers. One of my good friends, he is an amateur geek, like to the core, but he's also the head RF engineer for Roku. So everything that he does, he designs the RF system. So if anybody has a Roku and has those cool little remote controls that they have that you can plug your headset into and you can listen to the TV like that, that's all his design. He designed all that. The antenna systems, some people call designing antenna systems the black art. It's learning how to make an antenna sing the way that you want it to sing is not a light thing to accomplish. And of course, merit badges. Like, where would we be in scouting without merit badges? Well, so I went through and I went digging and I found about 14 merit badges that can benefit directly or indirectly from the attitude, knowledge, and skills learned in amateur radio. It's pretty amazing how many things amateur radio can touch and bring to your program, right? So you have aviation, digital, they use radios, digital technology, electricity, electronics. You can even build your own radios. They have these little radios, they literally build them into like little Tin Man cans. Emergency preparedness, energy, engineering, geocaching, of course, radio, robotics, search and rescue, sign signals and codes, space exploration, weather. Morse code's actually making kind of a comeback. It's kind of interesting, right? They took away that requirement, and you see more people are starting to get into Morse code and learning Morse code. Scout ham events. So the biggest one that we probably have each year is called JOTA or Jody, and it's called Jamboree on the Air. It is the largest scouting event every year because it takes place across the entire planet. You can literally talk to scouts around the world. One of my most favorite of these was a couple years ago. We typically do our troop would do a recruiting event for the Webelos from the packs that we have adjacent to us down here in South County. And we would go down to San Luis Forbay and we do a camp out for the weekend. And I bring my ham radio gear, and we were just messing around, and the Webelos and I were kind of playing with the radios, and it's Jamboree on the Air weekend. And so we were calling out, and these guys came, these other scouts we heard come through the radio, and we got to talking back and forth, and they were actually Canadian scouts on a camping trip up near the Yukon. And we were all standing around in t-shirts and shorts because it was October and it was still warm. And these guys, it was 20 below zero where these scouts were, and they were talking. So the scouts were talking back and forth about, how are you staying warm, and are you living in an igloo, and all this other stuff. It was really cool. But like all these scouts just, never met each other before, and suddenly they were like, they had known each other forever over ham radio. It was really neat. It's one of my most memorable moments in sharing ham radio with scouts. But yeah, Yukon scouts out of Canada. It was really cool. And they also have a variant of this. I've never participated in this variant of it, but they also have what's called Jamboree over the internet. And what they do is they're basically, it's like a radio simulator that they run on a computer, and then they can talk. It's kind of like talking on a radio, using a headset and everything, but it's done through the internet instead of actually over the air using radio energy, or you're talking through the internet. But that one's kind of fun to do too. If you have limited resources, or you don't have the ability to, gather enough ham radio operators to support something like that, you can always do Jody as well. And of course, just like anything else in scouting, if there's no patch, it didn't happen. So every year they offer a Jamboree on the Air patch, right? I have yet to see the 2021 patch, but you can see here's the 2020 patch here. So this, there's just so many facets to the hobby. It's kind of crazy. There's no way that you can cover it in like one slide presentation or one evening like this. It's just not going to happen. But there's a lot of fun stuff, like talking through the space station. So the space station just got a ham radio refresh. They got brand new gear up there, and you can literally, as the space station comes over, you can literally bounce a signal through the space station. They have a repeater that's on the space station, and you can send a signal through their radio, and it will come back out their radio and then come down in your area. And it's really kind of funny when it does the passover, like you hear, because it's flying over so fast, you just like hear kind of like these voices come up, and then they get louder and louder and louder. And all these guys are just like yelling through the radio to try to make a contact with somebody else. And then it just kind of goes away. It's like the Doppler effect, right? So it comes, and then it's gone, right? You usually only get about 5 minutes or so per pass, and that's it until they come over again. You can use directional antennas to help that, but it's kind of cool. It's kind of fun to do. Learn Morse code, track high altitude balloons, participate in local emergency drills, make new friends, radio back to the troop that you're done with your hike and let them know to start the mac and cheese water, right? We had an incident, our scouts were out on a hike, and they, of course, just like any good scout outing, it's always the adults that get hurt first. One of the adults turned their ankle, And our scouts were able to call back to camp with the radio that they had with them and let us know. And we were able to then go retrieve the adult. They didn't have to bring all the scouts back to camp with the adult. We went and got the adult and they could go and continue on with their hike. So, you know, stuff like that. It's just, it seems so simple. And there's no way that that would have worked with an FRS radar. They were way up the trail at the time. So you can transmit and receive position data. So they have things that are called like what's called APRS, or automatic position recording systems, that you can literally transmit where you are. You can actually give, you know, GPS coordinates. Build and experiment with your own antenna designs in the Midwest and places where there's tornado activity. Amateurs are a core of Skywarn systems that are out there. What else? Radio finding contests, which are called Fox and Hound, where you literally take a little transmitter and you hide it someplace, and the scouts have to find it. They have to use their radios and do direction finding and figure out where this radio is. And there's different ways that they can do that. They can build their own directional antennas using cheap tape measures from the hardware store and PVC pipe. They can actually construct an antenna that will be extremely signal direct. And so they have to point it and find out which way to go in order to find the radio transmitter. Tracking high altitude balloons. And these are all things you can also do. You don't do on the internet as well. Every once in a while, the ISS will actually transmit what they call slow scan television, or SCTV, or SSTV, which is slow scan TV, and they actually will transmit commemorative images. So like last year, there was a Sputnik event, and so they broadcast over amateur radio a TV image of this commemorative plaque. And if you had a proper receiver, you could plug your receiver into a computer and you could actually download the image. Stuff like, you know, it's just another thing, right? I know I'm going a mile a minute, aren't I? So covering all that, right? So how do you get started? So I know that some of you have your licenses. If you don't have your license, you need to get one, right? An FCC license is in one of three levels. You have a technician, general, and extra. Technician is where you start, where you can kind of use the handy talkies. You do have some what they call HF privileges to do some of the, you know, bounce your signals off the atmosphere, talk to other people on the other side of the planet, but they're pretty restricted. But that kind of get your feet wet, and you get your little walkie-talkie there for your 35, 40 bucks, and you're in the club, right? You learn, you get with a local amateur club or something. They tell you how to set up your radio or help you set up your radio to use local repeaters. And then you can start talking all over the place. General is where you get your first large allotment of HF capability and more privileges for higher power transmissions. And so that's where you really start getting into the work the world kind of situations. And then the amateur extra, which I currently am, gives you even more HF spectrum allocations, and I can do more crazy things. And each step of those, the test obviously increases in importance, because you get into some of the extra capabilities, and you can microwave your neighbors, or there's things that you can there's things you can do that you have access to that you kind of have to be know what you're doing, right? So once you have the license, then all you need is a radio. And I say this to everybody I know: the license test is not the test. Getting on the air is a real test. Mel knows, I know, we've all known amateurs that they go with some friends and they go take the test, and then they look at this thing with all the buttons on it and all that, and they go, I have no idea what I'm doing. And they never get on the air, right? They're not as intimidating as they might appear. And there's people that will help you. When you're an amateur, you're in a club, and there's lots of people that will come and help you get started. So a couple things: when you do go to take your test, do not overthink the exam. Your goal is to pass the exam, not learn everything in the exam. This is definitely one of those examples of you are only learning the test to pass the test. The real learning begins after you have your license, and once you get in with some friends that'll help you. So find a local hand club. If you don't, if you get in with a club and you don't like them, find another. There's lots of them in the Bay Area. Find or ask in the club for an Elmer. Ask for help. So an Elmer is in an amateur radio is anyone that knows more about amateur radio than you do. That's it. That's the definition of an Elmer, right? And that will actually help you with it. Much like Edge, right? And scouting. You know, you learn something and then you turn to the scout that's behind you and you teach that scout. Well, it's very much the same thing. When amateur radio, they were called an Elmer. So as soon as you know something that another person doesn't know, that makes you an Elmer to that person, right? It's all about learning and sharing what you know. Let's see. Yeah, I have learned so much from kind, wise, and patient Elmers in the hobby. So when you do that, you pay it forward. Okay. So both of these are hams, right? You can spend $1 bajillion if you want, or you can buy the $40 walkie-talkie. It doesn't matter. They're both still ham. They're both still ham radio, right? Some people have goals to do that kind of stuff, the crazy stuff. There's people out there that have, you know, a half a dozen radio towers, 80-foot towers in the backyard, and big old antenna arrays and things on top. And then you've got somebody that the only thing that they ever have is a walkie-talkie. But like I said, you can really leverage that walkie-talkie to talk to the world once you learn how to do it. There's so many facets and nuances to the hobby that there's room in it for everybody. So resources to get a license. My personal favorite is hamstudy.org. They are an outfit out of Utah that has put together an amazing, I think it's a great program. It's how I used their process and their study guides to get my general. And it's also where I studied to take my extra exam. They have the study guides. Then they also have practice tests that you can practice on there. And then now because you can do the online tests, you can actually sign up for an online test right there in the site. And if you can even choose the local San Benito group to do your testing if you like. You can, and if you wish to do that, you can email testing at sbcara.org, or just Google ham test study, and they'll get you to sites that will help you study for either the beginning or your next level of testing. And like I said, everything's online now. It's so easy. So what we do is we proctor the exam. We have them take pictures. We actually have them pull their web camera. They show us their desk. They share their desktop screen to us. And we literally sit there and we watch them take the exam through a Zoom meeting, right? We make sure that there's nothing extra on their desks. There's some other rules to it, but essentially they're just taking it over a Zoom course through a web page. And works out really well. You get graded instantly, practically, and you are usually granted your license literally within a few days. It used to be that you would go to, you'd go to a conference room someplace physically, you would take your test on a piece of paper. If you passed, then they collect all that information, then all that information had to be loaded into a site or sent away, and then you would get your call signs, maybe 5 days, a week later. Now you literally get it in like a day, maybe 2 days. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. Other resources. K2BSA is a scouting amateur radio club. I've got my K2BSA badge on here. K2BSA is kind of fun because I can actually, K2BSA is, I can actually borrow the call sign if I want. So my call sign is N6DZK, but if I'm running an event, like if I do like Scoutorama, I'll actually use the K2BSA call sign for the day. So there's a form that I go and I fill out as a club member, and I can actually use that call sign for the day as what they call a vanity call or a special event call sign for that. ARRL has a lot of resources for radio scouting. So there's the ARRL radio scouting site. There's actually a radioscouting.info site, and Scouts BSA has sites for the Jamboree on the Air and Jamboree on the internet information and how to participate in that, which is typically Jamboree on the air is typically the second weekend, I think, in October, second or third, I can't remember, but it's usually it's in October. It's usually the second or third weekend in October every year. Let's see. Just like anything else, it seems like it's daunting. Start small, but start, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Practice by, once you have your license, get involved with a local club, practice by participating in weekly check-in nets. It's a very simple thing. Somebody will come on, there'll be what's called the control operator, and you wait your turn, and then you announce your call sign. It's a social activity, but it's also practice for how we would do things in an emergency. You can't have in an emergency, everybody just jump on the radio and start yelling. Somebody has to be in charge, and somebody has to basically direct what the flow of information is going to be. So one of the things that we do is very simple, is we just get on and we just talk to each other in a controlled environment on the radio. And by doing these weekly nets, most ham clubs have some kind of weekly check-in or event that they participate in. San Benito County has at least a couple. They have their own weekly net call check-ins, and then they also do participate in other emergency nets. And GVRC has a weekly check-in, and it's actually coordinated from. We actually relay that information as part of the practice as well. So San Benito County, for instance, they do their check-in. They get their tally of people that checked in. That's passed into the Gilroy group, because San Benito County can't reach all the way to Santa Clara County, the city itself, from where they are. So they pass that information to Gilroy, and then Gilroy then passes that information up to the county. And so that's one way that we practice that information handling and message handling by practicing in these nets. Volunteer for an event or learn to be a net control. Don't be afraid. If you're, don't be afraid of the radio. Get on there and participate. It's crazy good practice to have for communication skills as being a net control. Don't be timid. Jump in, both feet. Work with a local repeater group and start your own net for your scouts or scouts in your area, and invite other troops to participate if you want, right? Start a net and just, find a local, with your repeater club, or if you'd like, and say, okay, we're going to do a net, and then publish it through Scouter Weekly or something. Okay. So just some of the success I've had, which I've enjoyed, I have 25 licensed scouts and scouters in my troop currently. It's been a lot of fun. We've done a lot of fun stuff. So what will your call sign be? And there's a inspirational quote for you to wind up the day. Even Abraham Lincoln enjoyed ham radio in his scouting career. And that's kind of it. Should we open it up to you can find me at n6dzk@arrl.net. If you need to get a hold of me, I'll answer your questions. You can always contact me. And if you're a Quicksilver unit, you'll probably be hearing from me in the not too distant future anyway, since I'm the commissioner. Repeaters where I hang out down here in Morgan Hill, K7DAA on 442.975 with a positive offset and 100 PL. You people that already hams know what that means. And also the W6GGF repeater down here at 147.825 with a negative offset and a 100 PL. And on the Carla system, which is a really cool system. If you don't know what Carla is, look up the Carla system. It is a system of linked repeaters throughout California, all the way to the Nevada border, Oregon border, and all the way down south. That allows you to talk to people all the way across the state. And then I have a little ham blog that I run down here locally. It's called afterthenet.net, where we publish things we talk about on our weekly net. So for our particular group, we have once a month, we have what's called a tech net night. where people can ask questions about, what kind of coax should I get? What kind of antennas are best? What's the newest thing in radios? Or if they have any other kind of cool projects or things they've been sharing. One of the things we've been doing in the past years, we've been focusing a lot on like battery packs, building our own, transitioning from, big lead batteries to lithium iron phosphate packs and building our own, and what those kind of look like. You can see that orange box on the table there in the little picture. In the picture there is my own 40 amp hour lithium iron phosphate pack that I built. That powers my equipment, and that my solar panel, that's what I take. And man, let me tell you, that thing, what I used to have was a toolbox that had two 35 amp hour batteries in it, and that thing weighed like almost 60 pounds for this one little box with two little batteries in it. This little orange box is like 12 pounds. It's so much lighter, and it's way lighter and has more power in it. So yeah. So those are kind of some of the fun things that we do. Well, for me anyways. So you guys all jazzed? You guys ready to start just unleashing the power of ham radio in your units? Boy, you guys are a talky bunch. What do you, so what do you guys, what are you guys doing in your units now? Is this something that you guys think that you could take back to your unit and be successful with? Are you guys looking to expand these kinds of opportunities in your units? You guys can unmute and talk.
So I just recently got my technician license, along with my 10-year-old who is just going into his AOL. And basically we're just trying to figure out, okay, so we took the test, now what do we do?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, the test is not the test. Getting on the air is the test. Yeah. Do you have radios yet?
We do.
Okay.
My husband actually has his general license, so he's sort of helping us out there.
Oh, absolutely. My whole family is licensed. I have 5 in my family. We all have our licenses, and we've all, we're definitely a major scouting family here. Very similar. My wife is a district advancement. I have 2 Eagles, and I have 2 Eagle boys, and I have a Ranger girl. So she was in Venture. Unfortunately, she aged out before she got to was able to join the troops. But yes, we're very much, and we use it all the time. We use amateur radio when we caravan as a unit. We use it in the campsites. We use it when they're going out on hikes. The hikers, somebody in the hike typically is radio equipped. Plus, just like I said, just if they're there and my gear's there, they can get on. They can just jump on the HF stuff, and I'm the control operator. I'm within shouting distance of the radio. They just can get on and just go start talking to people, right?
Hey, Ray, one of our participants actually did his Eagle project with ham radio. Misha, can you describe us what that project was all about?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so in April, actually really recently, I aged out in February, so this was on an extension. And I was trying to figure out what Eagle project I could do in least amount of time during COVID.
Yeah.
And it turns out doing an amateur radio, training session over an amount of a set of days turned out to be, a really good opportunity. So I was part of CERT last year. I didn't get recertified because they didn't have trainings due to COVID, of course. But I still was able to get into contact with the leader. I forgot what the name is, who leads CERT, right? But I got in contact with her and was able to organize an Eagle project for to teach people in the CERT community and the scouting community to bridge those 2 parts together, right? To get more scouts into CERT and radio, and to get CERT members ham radio certified. and we had about 10 people, like 50-50 of scouts and their members. So I think it was successful.
That's cool. That's a really great example. The licenses are good for 10 years. You have to renew them every 10 years, but there's basically, and it's not much to it. And that's evolving. That process is evolving too. They're automating a lot of that now. You used to have to fill out forms and stuff, right? But a lot of that's changing. But it's one of those things that you can and probably should have for life. We just, here in California, we're like I mentioned earlier, for Skywarn teams and things like that in the Midwest. Here in California, right, it's not an if, it's a when for us, right? And we know the infrastructure is going to fall over. Morgan Hill, I don't know what the dealio is here with Morgan Hill, but it seems like every time a cable gets a paper cut, we get knocked off the air completely. It's amazing, actually. And these systems these digital systems are supposed to be so resilient and redundant, and yet they're not. You look at what took place in the Paradise Fire. That fire, when that fire came through, their cell phone towers were wiped out in the first hour and a half of that fire. They lost all their cell phone capability. It was one of the major things that came out because of that. Was they had the whole community, they had that whole community alert system where they were supposed to be able to send out the emergency text messages to people to let them know. Their cell phone infrastructure got wiped out like in no time, and so they couldn't get the alerts out. Right. So this over reliance on these modern digital technology has, in more than one instance, has proven to be an Achilles heel, not the savior that it's supposed to be. And amateur radio can really fill that gap, but it can only fill the gap if the people that want to participate take the time to learn and to take the time to train, right? Because like I said, having a whole bunch of people just jump on the radio and start asking questions and stepping all over each other is not going to be not the right way to do things, right? There's a cadence and etiquette to doing things, and when you learn that, it really comes in handy later. But it comes in handy. It's something that you can apply to all kinds of situations, right? Running a meeting, or there's all kinds of skills, these communication skills that scouts can learn as part of this process that will benefit them moving forward. There's lots of tangibles and intangibles to becoming a good radio operator. So that's one of the reasons why I like it so much. Okay. Any other questions, comments? How was it? Was I too dry, too boring? Did I not tell enough jokes?
Good information, Ray. A lot of good information there.
I thought about what it is that we really wanted to cover. It's kind of like a wet your whistle. There's only so much you can do, like through a Zoom meeting, right? To kind of, but I mean, there's so, like I said, there's so many facets to it. You can do as little or as much as you want. We had a local group of ham radio operators that just did an ISS station contact with a local school. So typically when schools do that, they're actually amateur radio operators that actually make that happen for the school. The local ham club or somebody actually who sponsors that goes and provides the radio equipment that they need and sets that up so that the school can then talk to the astronauts on the space station. That's in almost every case, that's actually amateur radio operators that participate in that and make that happen. So it's kind of slick.
Hey, Adam, you posted the link for the Santa Clara nets. Do you participate in most of those nets, or is there a particular one that you would recommend?
I'll just hang out on a couple of them and listen. But it's a good website there I posted for just listening to a bunch of them.
Yep.
Or trying to jump from one to the other as the Santa Clara one will go and all the city ones will go, and then they'll go back and then report back to the county, and it's hard to keep up for me, but it's very, as a beginner, right? As maybe for Katie's question is try and find a local net and just listen. see how they talk, see how they respond. Right. Back to you, Net, right?
Yep. And then just jump in. Just jump in. I had a slide in here. I removed it because I don't want to like color the conversation, but there are some crusty curmudgeons in the hobby and you just have to ignore them. There are some of the, the old guard that are like, the ones that sit on the porch and you get off my lawn, right? There's those guys, right? That, yeah. I remember when we had to do 80 words a minute to get our license, and no, they're fun to listen to, but there's room for everybody. There's room for everybody. And if you come across one of those, just find somebody else. There's so many friendly people in the hobby that are way more than willing to share what they know with you to help you get started. It's just one of those tools that you don't need it till you need it, or you don't want it till you want it. Right? You're in a situation where cell phone's not appropriate, or text messaging, it just ain't cutting it, right? Where it's just like one of those things where you guys all work, right? You guys are all in these situations where that one guy, the guy that will never pick up the phone and talk to you, they'll spend a month sending emails back and forth, where one 5-minute conversation would fix the whole thing, right? We've all been there, right? Ham radio is a lot like that, right? Text message, just pick up the radio and talk, right? And it's learning to use the right medium for the right occasion. So. All right, we are 4 minutes over.
All right. And people are still hanging around. So there's no meetings after us. It's no reason to cut us off any early. If you guys want to hang on. And Ray can keep talking, as you guys can tell.
Oh, yeah, I can go all night.
So
yeah.
I had a question, Ray. You had that list of scouts that had gone and getting their license. How did that go? Just from example, or they start with the merit badge, or they were just interested in the hobby, or how did you encourage that?
Mostly because I would take my gear with me camping, right? That was really that was the hook, was just taking my HF gear camping and setting it up in the campsites and just talking on the radio. And they wanted to talk on the radio. And since I'm the control operator, anybody can talk on the radio, on my radio, as long as I'm there, right? We've talked to Japan, we've talked to Russia, we've talked all over the place. We were at the camporee at Roaring Camp a few years ago, and I made a contact from Roaring Camp to Serbia, of all places. Could not believe it. On a little 100-watt radio and a little vertical antenna. It's like, that's insane, right? I'm actually taking my tiny little signal, skipping it off the atmosphere, and having it come down on the other side of the planet. That's just nuts. A few weeks ago, there was a big event. They actually call it radio sport, which is kind of interesting. It's literally called radio sport because when you're trying to make contacts, people that are like into like contesting, which is, making as many contacts as you can in a weekend for a particular event or something like that, they literally call it radio sport. It's like fishing, right? You can call on the radio. That doesn't mean anybody's going to answer. That doesn't mean anybody's going to be able to hear you, right? And so it's like fishing. Then okay, well, that didn't work, so I got to get a more powerful radio. I got to get a bigger antenna. I got to get right, one-upsmanship and competition between people. But at the same time, it was the conditions. A lot of it's driven by conditions. Like, so I was saying before earlier that, we actually checked the solar weather report. People that are serious about this literally check the solar weather report, because sunspots are what drive the activity for us. And what they do is it's all about energizing the upper layers of the atmosphere. So when we get sunspots and we get that energy coming at the Earth, that energy is what energizes our magnetic shields around the planet, right? And it's what energizes those layers, and that's what blocks that harmful energy from coming down and turning us all into toasted marshmallows. So But that same thing works to our advantage in ham radio because it's bouncing that energy off to the back to out to space. That also means that I can bounce my radio signal off it on the inside of the shell and back down someplace else, right? And so when those upper layers of the atmosphere are not energized, then they're porous, and then the signal can go and pass through out into space versus instead of skipping and then coming back down. So we just reached the bottom of solar. We're basically passing through solar, what they call solar minimum right now, and we're actually entering our next solar maximum phase. So if you're going to get into the hobby, now's a pretty good time to do it, because as the sun and solar activity pops up, the HF bands will be coming alive more and more and more. So, which is just amazing. I still remember my first contact that I made was to the French Polynesia. The very first HF contact, I had literally just stuck a wire in the backyard. I really wanted to do my first HF because I had just got my first HF radio, and at the time I was still only a technician, so I'm only allowed to operate in certain bands. And and I just literally just stuck a wire on top of a pole in the backyard and just staked it out like a tent in the backyard, and came in the house and dialed it in and talked to some guy in French Polynesia. What is that, like 4,000 miles away? It was insane. That's insane that you can do that, right? And that's with a fairly high power radio though. A couple weekends ago, I had this little guy here. This is kind of expensive, but this is kind of, you can shrink things down pretty small, right? So this thing only puts out like, oh gosh, I think about 12 watts, which is not a whole lot more than what's in a walkie-talkie. And I was talking to people on the East Coast with it through ham radio. It was just, right, it was like 15 watts and 12 watts. And I was talking to people in Connecticut and New England. So you just never know. And you meet the nicest people. I mean, they're really nice. So.
Hi, Ray, Raphael here.
Okay.
I have a question. Before that, thank you very much for the talk. It has a lot of good memories. My dad was a ham radio. I'm from Colombia.
Okay.
And I remember when I was a scout, I'm talking about more than 35 years ago, we used to do the Jamboree on the Air with my dad's radio from Colombia. And that was amazing. And I had been filled for a few days with scouts from all over the city just coming to do the Jamboree on the Air.
Yeah.
So it's amazing.
It's a big thing. Actually, from what I can tell, it's actually a big thing in Latin America to do the Jamboree on the Air. There's a lot of scouts that participate from down there.
And I remember every year it was something that we used to do every single troop in the city.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of good memories. And unfortunately, I don't have my license. I would like, maybe now I'm getting excited to do it. My son finishes his AOL and moving to troop in next week. I think maybe there's an excuse to maybe try to encourage him as well.
Yeah, the price of entry is so low now.
It sounds really nice.
Yeah.
So my question is there when the Jamboree on the Air is going on, does the district organize like some kind of list of amateur radio people that can like host people in their houses or places, or I don't know, that we can take the scouts there and have them have the opportunity of participating on the Jamboree on the Air?
So I love your question, but you're going to hate the answer.
Uh-oh.
No. Our council is absolutely horrible at organizing Jamboree on the Air events. It's not something I've done in the past personally. It's something that maybe I can maybe now begin to do, but I've always been participating with my own troop. So by going out and doing things. And so I was focused on my scouts and my unit versus doing something or organizing something at a council level. But I think it's something that we're Silicon Valley. We're in the heart of Silicon Valley. How can we not be
because
doing
I mean, I bet that I asked my son if he knows what amateur radio is. He has no idea. Yeah. And actually, I didn't know the reach that you could have right now. But it's really amazing, and it's really something that they can have on their list of things to do and be more prepared.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for the talk, Ray.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Yeah, as Mel knows, I can go on. I can talk all night on something. I'll chit chat. I'll totally talk your ears off. Especially for something that's as fun as it is, and like I said, it has many facets as it does. My desk literally here is covered in radio related things. I have I'm building what's currently building out a system that's called Arden, which is an amateur radio data network. So I got the radio, the Wi-Fi horns and power adapters and DMR hotspots and microcontrollers. What else do I have? Yeah. So yeah, I am up to my ears in projects at the moment. Unfortunately, right now my radio is actually at the shop. It's in Yesu down in Southern California being repaired. I think I've used it so much it quit on me. So I'm waiting for that.
It's your 991.
Yeah.
Oh.
Finals. I think the finals have actually been blown for a long time. So finals are the power transistors that are used to push the RF energy out to your antenna, and they're big chunk of silicone that have they're fairly large transistors that go in the radio, and they're the ones that push the power to the antenna. And if you don't use them correctly, or there's an issue with the way the radio was built, then they can actually fail. And mine failed, so it went back to Yesu for repair. It's a known thing in that particular generation of the radio. When they designed it, there's a parameters in there, and they push a little bit too much current. They basically overjuiced those transistors in order to get a little bit more performance out of them, and it causes them to fail prematurely. So, but they've since repaired that design, so when I get it back, it'll have the new design on the board. But yeah. So in the meantime, that was why I was using this little guy, this little portable thing, because that was the only one I had. And lo and behold, I made like 30 contacts that night on 12 watts, which was pretty crazy. All right, looks like everybody's dropping off.
Great. Thank you very much.
Any other
Good job,
questions?
Ray.
Yeah. Anything else, Mel?
I think you're good.
Okay.
All right.
I want to thank everybody for coming and participating. And you have my contact information, the n6dzk@arrl.net. And I'll be more than happy to answer questions if you have them later. Okay.
Great.
Thanks,
you very much.
everyone. All right. Good night.
Thanks, Ray.